'Twas the night before Christmas on a cold December day when the creatives at Fastpass Facts were arguing away. They debated what videos to make for their channel, but everything felt like it was going to dismantle.
I want to keep talking about animatronics.
The holidays are here and I want to do Christmas content.
They argued all day and they argued all night until a voice in their head said, why not do both and make everything right?
Comet. The Santa Claus is a Christmas classic and such a fantastic and fun film. It has a pretty peculiar plot, great actors, and lots of amazing practical effects. These effects were achieved thanks to the amazing team at Amalgamated Dynamics, founded by Tom Woodruff Jr., a student of Stan Winston, who we've actually talked about before because he played Pumpkinhead. The team was in charge of creating Tim Allen's transformation into Santa Claus, as well as the creation of 8 animatronic reindeer. To create these reindeer, a sculpture was created from the approved cartoon-like concepts. Then, some fiberglass molds were created so the animatronics could be put together. And finally, the fur and final details were added. These were impressive full-body animatronic reindeer that were controlled with a console by puppeteers. The Santa Claus 2 required that Comet the reindeer had a more prominent role because he was the one that accompanied Santa in his search for the future Mrs. Claus. For this, the team designed a special head for Comet. This is called a lip sync head, which has a lot of mechanisms in the mouth area. Reindeer do not have lips like a human mouth, so they put extra movement into the muzzle area as well as the standard lip mix. If the idea was that he spoke English, they would have it pre-recorded and played it back. Instead, Comet's dialogue was a mumbled reindeer language, so they performed it live, and a voiceover artist provided the vocals later. This head was reused for the Santa Claus 3. In addition to this special head, another animatronic was created so that Tim Allen could ride it. This made the shot more realistic. As I say in Amalgamated Dynamics, you can't beat the real thing on set. Bjorn, the animatronic polar bear. What would the holiday season be without polar bears? Polar bears are majestic and unique creatures, and we would all love to interact up close with one of them. Well, the team at Los Caos thought the same, and they went ahead and created Bjorn the polar bear. Bjorn is an animatronic polar bear puppet complete with blinking eyes, a sniffing nose, moving mouth, and realistic sounds, and a huge hit with audiences worldwide. This animatronic was created by Los Caos, a London-based group that specializes in creating interactive experiences with animatronics, puppetry, and makeup. With each show created, this team works to create the most realistic and interactive experiences. And this is clearly the case of Bjorn, since many people can't believe that he is not a real polar bear. Bjorn has appeared at environmental events, Christmas events, winter-themed events, snow and ice parties, and film premieres. He is a fully animated puppet pod with a puppeteer inside that operates all movements, including facial animations and mouth opening. During each presentation, Bjorn is accompanied by his herder, Ursula, and together they try to create awareness of the problems that polar bears are facing because of global warming. They also teach the audience about the polar bear's habitat and habits. During this presentation, the audience can pet and interact with the bear. This team has created an amazing and ingenious experience that not only entertains, but educates the audience about one of the most amazing animals on the planet, which is sadly in danger of extinction. Hopefully, Bjorn and Ursula can educate enough people and do something about it. Baby Grinch and Max, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. How the Grinch Stole Christmas was a pretty ambitious movie since the beginning. And how could it not be, if creating a world right out of Dr. Seuss's imagination and bringing it to the big screen required it? Back in 1998, Audrey Geisel let the world know that after years of trying, the movie studios would be able to buy the film rights of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. She had many requests for the studio that would be lucky enough to get these rights, and one of the main ones was that any actor submitted for the Grinch had to be of comparable stature to Jack Nicholson, Jim Carrey, Robin Williams, and Dustin Hoffman. So later that year, it was announced that Universal had acquired the rights for the movie and that Ron Howard would direct it, with none other than Jim Carrey starring in it.
I guess I could use a little social interaction.
Saying the movie was ambitious is an understatement. To get in a costume, Jim Carrey had to endure 8.5 hours for the first round, and after that, an average of 3 hours each day. He actually described the costume and prosthetics as feeling like he was being buried alive every day. Not only that, but the yellow contact lenses that he wore were actually hurting him. The producer had to bring a specialist who trains people on the CIA to cope with torture so that he could endure the process.
What that might be referring to is when I did the Grinch, I was, literally the makeup was like being buried alive every day.
How long did it take?
The first day was 8.5 hours. And I went back to my trailer and put my leg through the wall. And I told Ron Howard I couldn't do the movie. And then Brian Grazer came in, and being the fix-it man, and came up with a brilliant idea, which was to hire a gentleman who is trained to teach CIA operatives how to endure torture.
Ron Howard wanted to experience this, so one day, he went to the set at 3 a.m. and asked the team to dress him up as the Grinch for one day of filming. So he worked that day dressed up as the character. This fantastic costume and prosthetic makeup were created by none other than the Academy Award winner Rick Baker.
When Ron called me about the Grinch and asked me if I was interested, I said, yeah, of course. You know, it's like a dream come true. I always wanted to do a big fantasy film where virtually everyone is makeup.
The Grinch suit was also covered in yak hair, dyed green, and sewed onto a spandex suit. Jim Carrey was not the only one that had to endure this. Actor Josh Ryan Evans, who played the 8-year-old Grinch, wore the same makeup and bodysuit that Carrey wore, but took 5.5 hours, 2 hours more than Carrey, because his prosthetics were smaller and more intricate. But they were not the only two Grinch on set. An animatronic baby Grinch puppet was made for the flashback sequences showing the Grinch as a baby. The puppet was made largely from foam latex that was painted to match the Grinch's color. The head and body were operated by puppeteering rods and wires protruding from the back of the animatronic. Baby Grinch's limbs were removable, allowing it to be easily positioned on set, and then it was finished by covering it with green body hair. This animatronic was also created by Rick Baker, and was actually auctioned off in his prop store back in 2015, where it was sold for $3,500. But this was not the only animatronic used in the movie. Max is the Grinch's cute and loyal dog who helps him with his schemes, and sometimes to be a better who. He was actually played by a female dog from a local shelter named Kelly. She was trained for 15 weeks and had lots of backup, which included 5 other dogs and an animatronic. The last time this animatronic was seen was on display at Universal Studios Hollywood. Krampus. Krampus is a fantastic movie and an excellent throwback to classic horror films like Poltergeist or Gremlins. The film used many old-school practical effects, from the elves' costumes with carefully sculpted masks that balanced the cute and creepy aspects of the elves, to impressive makeup effects and amazing animatronic. To be able to create this animatronic, a 3D model was created first. It was then printed and modified so it could become the animatronic puppet. It was done with resistant material so it could receive lots of damage, and then be repaired after every shot.
He took a bit too much damage and some of the wires got crossed, and just as we were putting it together for this sequence, it started smoking. Our lovely animatronics guys, Peter and Roddy, sorted it out in record time. So we're good to go again.
Another terrifying animatronic was the Cherub. To create it, the team made a mixture of sculpted parts and purchased other parts. Most of these puppets were designed around the scenes, because Michael Daughtry had a perfect idea of how he wanted each and every scene to turn out.
Having all the storyboards that we had from Michael and his team was amazing to work with, because he literally said, like, all I need to do is move from here to here, turn, and that's the shot. And we would tailor the puppets' physical abilities to those shots.
For the scene where the Cherub attacks Tony, 6 puppeteers and 2 animatronic experts were needed. The clown was part actress, so the movements could be more realistic, and part animatronic. The clown's head was an animatronic that had very impressive expressions. The way the team created Krampus was right out of a nightmare. A 3D model was created to use as a base, and from there, they began to modify the design to be able to make it more terrifying. They added chains and bells and a coat made of different fabrics. Mechanical limbs resembling goat's feet were created for close-ups, and there was a special rig created for the body, which could be used by a performer with a camera. This suit, with all accessories and materials, weighed 70 pounds. This film is pretty impressive because each day we see less and less practical effects being used in cinema, so we appreciate Michael Daughtry's efforts to bring this kind of works back into the modern cinema. The seasonal group. One of the most interesting parts of being a creator is researching the themes we'll be talking about and finding people with a great passion for the same interests. And as you know, we love animatronics. So while we were looking for Christmas animatronics, we came across the Seasonal Group. The Seasonal Group is a family business based in the UK, dedicated exclusively to the creation of holiday animatronics and decorations for shopping centers and amusement parks. More recently, their creators were featured in the 2019 IAAPA. Among the animatronics that were featured, we could find a trio of penguins that sang a cappella. This trio can be synchronized and programmed to do any type of show with personalized recordings, a set of 3 Yetis with a wide range of movements, and an incredible snowman, among many others. The company invests in great talent to be able to bring to life these amazing creations using all the best technology and material available for people all over to enjoy. Batman Returns, Penguins. New Year's, same debate. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie? Some people seem to think it is, some people seem to think it isn't. But while considering Die Hard a Christmas movie can be controversial, there's another movie that we should be talking about, Batman Returns. You will find lots of articles online explaining why Batman Returns is a Christmas movie, and we agree with every one of them. But the main reason why it is obvious. Christmas is everywhere in the film. Gotham is decorated with lights, the characters mention the holiday multiple times.
Happy holidays.
And the start of the action happens at a tree lighting ceremony. It is set in the days leading up to December 25th, and Gotham looks pretty amazing at that time of year. The snowy, freezing backdrop, filled with humongous Christmas trees and constantly twinkling decorations, is a perfect backdrop for the Penguins' hugely nefarious plans. The most wonderful time of year, a time when families should be coming together, is blown apart by a supervillain who is mad at the world because he never actually had a family of his own. The spirit of Christmas permeates every scene in Batman Returns, more so than pretty much any other Christmas movie out there, because so much of the film relies on the setting of Christmas for the plot and the action sequences to make sense. There are many more reasons, but we'll leave it at that. Now, the main villain of the movie, as we know, is the Penguin. And the Penguin had an army of, you guessed it, penguins. And who was in charge of creating those penguins? The famous Stan Winston studio. The studio designed and built 30 full-body mechanical penguin puppets, 10 each of 3 different penguin species, and also 6 mechanical heads and suits, all of which were interspersed with live penguins to create the Penguins Army. There were 3 sizes of penguin puppets for the film, 18-inch black-footed, 32-inch king, and 36-inch emperor penguins. They also had larger versions that were actually little people in suits with mechanical heads. The heads and the flapping wings were puppeteered, but the walking was done by the people in the suits. Stan Winston Studio mechanical effects designers Richard Landon and Craig Catton-Largent oversaw the engineering of the cable-operated and radio-controlled mechanical penguins, with Alan Scott assisting. Each of the 30 penguin puppets required nearly 200 mechanical parts to achieve head and neck movement, plus the movement of the eyes, beaks, and wings. For one of the first time in Stan Winston Studios history, the Penguin Army's mechanical parts were designed entirely on a computer, using computer-aided design technology. The scenes ended up being pretty impressive, and there were lots of cute penguins around. Gremlins. Another controversial Christmas movie, Gremlins. Gremlins pioneered an animatronic puppet approach to bring their characters to life. This film was director Joe Dante's breakthrough, and a large part of its success was due to the team that he put together with writer Chris Columbus and creature creator Chris Wallace. Dante worked in several films before Gremlins, but The Howling, a film about a newswoman that is sent to a remote mountain resort where the residents are werewolves, stands out because it paved the way for makeup effects. However, after this, Dante's career completely stopped for a while, until one day, the Gremlins script fell into his lap. He found this pretty weird since he didn't know Spielberg at the time, but it turned out that Spielberg was a fan. He loved Dante's film Piranha because it was his favorite Jaws ripoff, and apparently, The Howling inspired him to cast Dee Wallace Stone as Elliot's mother in E.T. The script was written completely by Chris Columbus, and it was pretty complex because it described things that were very hard to do at the time. Thankfully, Dante had worked previously with Chris Wallace on the remake of Creature from the Black Lagoon, which was ultimately cancelled, but this allowed Dante to send Wallace the script to evaluate it. Wallace was surprised by the complexity of the scenes, but he was excited to work on the project. So, the pair started to create sketches, using Chuck Jones cartoons as a reference for the Mogwai. During this time, Spielberg met with the team and gave them his notes and the changes he wanted to make to the character. There were so many changes that the puppets had to be reworked. In fact, in earlier concepts, Gizmo was supposed to become Stripe, but Spielberg fell in love with Gizmo and wanted him to be a part of the whole film. So a month before production began, this was changed. Now, the use of animatronics was what made the movie happen. There was talk of making the Gremlins using stop motion, but that would have been extremely expensive, and there was not enough time to do it. There was also the possibility of using monkeys in Gremlins costumes, but Wallace was completely against that. So using animatronics was the solution. But there was another problem. Could the animatronics do everything the script asked for? The solution was simple. They just rewrote the script to be able to tell the story around the puppets. Thanks to this, the project kept growing because more and more Gremlins were needed to be able to do more scenes.
This picture is by far the most ambitious thing I've ever worked on, in that the characters we've had to create for this picture are active through the entire picture and do an awful lot of stuff. Here in Gremlins, it's all, every other shot is a gremlin doing something.
But Warner was worried. They had concerns about the Gremlins, especially when they turned evil because they thought that destructive pranks were a problem. So they asked Dante to cut some of the Gremlins out. Spielberg came in defense of Dante, saying that they should rename the movie People if they were going to be cutting so many Gremlins out. So, in the end, the team was able to create some of the most iconic creatures of cinema. Ghost of Christmas Present, Muppet Carol. A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens is one of the most iconic Christmas novels ever made. So iconic that it has been recreated millions of times. There's Mickey's Christmas Carol, Bill Murray's Scrooged, a Flintstones Christmas Carol, Jim Carrey's A Christmas Carol, to name a few. Of course, the Muppets wouldn't be left behind. So in 1992, the Muppet Christmas Carol came out. This was the first Muppet movie made without Jim Henson, who had sadly passed away 2 years earlier. This film was directed by Brian Henson, Jim Henson's son. This was actually his directorial debut, and he went on to direct Muppet Treasure Island. He was 28 at the time and terrified of directing. He even begged other people to direct, but he ended up doing an amazing job. When the team was working on the script, they wanted to do a complete parody, but then thought of something more interesting. Nobody had ever captured the wonderful way that Dickens described the scenes in the novel. So they decided to have Charles Dickens narrating the movie, and who would be better to play him than Gonzo?
Hello! Welcome to the Muppet Christmas Carol. I am here to tell the story.
And I am here for the food.
My name is Charles Dickens.
And my name is Rizzo the Rat.
Sadly, Jim Henson couldn't return to do Kermit's voice, so Steve Whitmire would be taking over. He was really worried that he would not do a perfect job recreating Henson's voice for Kermit, and the night before he had to do his Kermit scenes, he went to sleep pretty anxious about the whole thing. And something strange and magical happened while he was asleep. He dreamt of a white hotel lobby where he found Henson. He approached him and told him that he was anxious and nervous about playing Kermit. He stopped, and there was a thoughtful gesture Jim would do, where he would take both of his index fingers and put them under his chin. And after that, he said, "It will pass." After this, Whitmire went to work feeling great. He remembered the dream, did the work smoothly, and it turned out great. All he needed was a little bit of encouragement. The film sets were pretty tricky because they were built to accommodate the Muppeteers, so they were elevated to leave room for them to walk around. Planks and platforms were put in place for Michael Caine, who played Scrooge, and his human co-stars to walk on. You can see how crucial careful foot placing was as the Muppets swarmed him singing the opening song, Scrooge. As you can see, this film was really ambitious, and there were many amazing details while filming it. Each of the 3 Ghosts of Christmas were pretty challenging, but the results were awesome. The Ghost of Christmas Past has an eerie, floating physicality. To be able to achieve this look, Muppeteers were submerged in a tank full of baby oil, backed by a green screen to record the performance. This proved to be expensive and difficult to keep clean, so they had to switch to water. Though the rod puppets' glues and paints interacted poorly with the water, they got the shots they needed, and the scenes were a success. But the most complex of all the spirits was the Ghost of Christmas Present. He was a part puppet, part animatronic, and part actor. The puppet was created so a full-size man could fit inside, but across the room, Jerry Nelson performed the character's voice and expressions using a remote control. This was pretty challenging because there were 2 people bringing the same character to life, so they had to be perfectly synced. It is fantastic that they put so much work into this character, and it worked because he's such a lovable and cute ghost.
Who does your hair?
Haunted Mansion Holiday Animatronics. Haunted Mansion Holiday is the coolest holiday overlay of any ride. It starts way back in September for Halloween time and lasts all the way to January when the holiday time ends. When the Country Bear Christmas Special and the Small World Holiday proved to be successful holiday overlays, Imagineers decided that it was time the Haunted Mansion got a holiday overlay of its own. They initially thought that having a Christmas Carol themed overlay would be a good idea for the ride, but decided against it due to the attraction's setting in New Orleans Square and the incongruity of bringing Santa Claus into the eerie environment of the Haunted Mansion. Instead, they decided to base it on The Nightmare Before Christmas after considering which Disney character would celebrate Christmas in the Haunted Mansion, should Santa Claus ever land there on his journey.
Eureka! This year, Christmas will be ours!
Haunted Mansion Holiday opened on October 3rd, 2001, and of course, it became an instant classic and a hugely popular ride among guests. During this overlay, the mansion gets completely redecorated, with jack-o'-lanterns and candles. The ride has lots of amazing holiday props, gags, and animatronics, and it is so cute and festive. But there are 4 main holiday animatronics that we want to talk about today. The first one would be the Hatbox Ghost. When the Hatbox Ghost returned to the Haunted Mansion back in 2015, fans started to wonder if he would be getting into the holiday spirit when the time for the holiday overlay arrived at the Haunted Mansion. And when Haunted Mansion Holiday opened, we were delighted to see that he did. The Hatbox Ghost remained at the end of the attic scene, surrounded by Santa Claus hats and wearing a new holiday felt hat for his collection. He also used to have a big bow on his hatbox, but we haven't seen it in the past couple years. The next animatronic that we see is Jack Skellington himself. He is standing at the entrance of the graveyard wearing his Sandy Claus outfit and holding a bag full of toys, while Zero is on his side. He greets and welcomes us to his Christmas and wishes us happy holidays. The next animatronic is Sally. Sally is a pretty recent addition to the ride. The first time she appeared was back in 2016, and we're so happy she did. Before this, she could only be found in the portrait corridor, in a changing portrait where she is shown holding a miniature Christmas tree only for the portrait to change, showing the Christmas tree burned up. And at the exit crypt in place of Little Leota, waving off into the distance as Jack flew by in his coffin sleigh led by skeleton reindeer. But nowadays, she can also be seen at the graveyard, gazing lovingly at Jack with a basket full of the same snacks that she brings Jack in the movie. And last but not least, Oogie Boogie. Oogie was added to the mansion in 2003. Before that, a panel showing Lock, Shock, and Barrel surrounded by toys stood on this place. In the exit crypt, right where the hitchhiking ghosts are seen, Oogie appears dressed up as Oogie Claus, hat and beard included. He has a kind of buzzsaw wheel of fortune labeled as Oogie's Holiday Tricks and Treats that he uses to hand out tricks and treats for guests. This holiday overlay is terrific. Jack Frost. Jack Frost is a 1998 film starring Michael Keaton about a father who sadly dies in a car accident, and 1 year later, he returns as a snowman and has a final chance to make things right with his son. The snowman who, as we said before, was voiced and mannered by Michael Keaton and an animatronic puppet. It was brought to life by Jim Henson's Creature Shop and George Lucas's Industrial Light and Magic for the CGI parts. It took 22 weeks to create the snowman and devise the perfect features, incorporating expressive eyes and brows and round cheeks. The resulting Jack Frost was a 5.5-foot tall animatronic snowman that could move, maneuver its arms, talk, and express emotion. The director wanted to make sure the puppet had the main actor's characteristics, but still looked like it was made by a kid. This was going perfectly, but there was a problem. George Clooney was initially attached to the project, but when he left to do Batman and Robin, ex-Batman Michael Keaton was cast into the lead role. This caused lots of trouble for Jim Henson's Creature Shop, because they had designed their snowman animatronic specifically to Clooney's facial features and acting style. But thankfully, it all worked out at the end. The form of the snowman was made out of foam and covered with clay, and then the skin was generated by using a combination of foam rubber and silicone. Different variations of the snowman's head and body were created for specific scenes, and the Henson Creature Shop crew estimated that at least 60 variations of the snowman were made for production. A lot of what the crew had to do was based on how the head was designed, and the kind of lip-sync performance required for the film. There ended up being 10 servo mechanisms just in the lips, which gave the puppeteer a lot of ability to do lip shapes. During production, it took a team of 5 specialized puppeteers working in synchronization to generate a performance from Jack Frost. This movie is a holiday classic, and it is so impressive now that we know Jack Frost was an animatronic.